30,000 feet over Binh Long Province, 3 B-52Fs hold formation so tight their contrails braid into one white scar across the monsoon sky. Below, an NVA regiment digs trenches through rubber plantations, certain that altitude means safety, that American bombers need runways close by, that jungle canopy hides everything. What happens in the next half minute will rewrite every assumption about sanctuary, dispersion, and survival. Because when industrial tonnage meets precision timing, the jungle doesn't just burn, it liquefies. Operation Rolling Thunder had taught Hanoi one lesson by early 1966. Stay dispersed, stay mobile, and American tactical jets would waste sorties, hunting ghosts. NVA commanders pushed entire regiments into war zone C and D. Dense triple canopy stretches north of Saigon, where a company could vanish under 20 feet of mahogany and teak. Intelligence officers in Saigon watched infrared photos pile up, cook fires, trail junctions, supply caches. But turning pixels into target coordinates took days, and by then the enemy had moved. The North Vietnamese had learned to read the rhythm of American air power. F-4 Phantoms screamed in low and fast, dropped their loads on suspected positions, then climbed out before the 37mm guns could track them. It was a war of guesses and empty craters. Then Strategic Air Command offered a different arithmetic. B-52 Stratofortresses, designed to deliver thermonuclear weapons over the Soviet Union, could carry 84 500-pound bombs, or 42,000-pounders, in their cavernous bellies. Flying from Andersen Air Force Base on Guam, 2,600 miles away, they could loiter at altitudes where neither MiGs nor ground fire could reach, then release their loads with radar-guided precision. The concept, codenamed Arc-Light, inverted every assumption about close air support. Instead of seeing the target, crews would trust coordinates radioed from ground controllers and bomb through clouds, through night, through canopy so thick that even napalm barely scorched the understory. The first Arc-Light mission, launched on June 18, 1965, against a suspected Viet Cong stronghold in Bình Long Province. 30 bombers struck in waves. Ground troops swept the target zone hours later and found craters, shattered timber, and silence. The B-52F model, assigned to Arc-Light, carried a crew of 6: pilot, co-pilot, navigator, radar navigator, electronic warfare officer, and gunner. The radar navigator, seated in the belly, eyes locked on a green cathode ray scope, owned the mission's final seconds. His scope painted the ground in ghostly returns. Rivers showed as black voids, hills as bright blobs. And if intelligence had done its job, a set of offset aim points that bracketed the target box. Release computers aboard each bomber synchronized with inertial navigation platforms, accurate to within 300 feet after a 6-hour flight. When 3 B-52 seconds flew in a cell, staggered by 15 seconds, and spaced a quarter-mile apart, their bomb trains overlapped into a continuous belt of detonations roughly a mile long and half a mile wide. The term of art was pattern bombing, but crews called it mowing the lawn. Ordnance crews at Andersen worked 12-hour shifts hanging bombs in the climate-controlled bellies and on external pylons. A single Stratofortress could carry up to 60,000 pounds of conventional ordnance, though typical Arc-Light loads hovered around 51,000 pounds, a mix of M100 and 17 750-pounders and M100 and 18 3,000-pounders. Each bomb rode a simple ballistic arc, no laser guidance, no TV seekers, just gravity and math. But when 27 bombers, a full Arc-Light strike package, dropped in sequence, the result was over 1,300 bombs, impacting within a 6-minute window. For defenders on the ground, there was no warning. B-52 seconds at 30,000 feet were inaudible, invisible, and the first indication of attack was the horizon turning into a wall of dirt and fire. North Vietnamese doctrine in 1966 still emphasized massed infantry and centralized command. Regiments dug elaborate trench networks, stored ammunition in bunkers, reinforced with logs and sandbags, and positioned command posts within a few hundred yards of frontline units to maintain radio discipline and runner networks. This worked against ARVN sweeps and even against Marine rifle companies, where the fight devolved into small unit firefights at ranges under 200 yards. But it created a vulnerability that American planners began to exploit: concentration. If intelligence could fix a regiment's location within a square mile, Arclight could obliterate command structure, supply dumps, and troop morale in a single pass. The challenge was intelligence. Signals, intercepts, gave rough areas. Photo reconnaissance showed trails and clearings, but not the bunkers hidden beneath them. Ground patrols, often Special Forces-led civilian irregular defense group teams, or Marine Force Recon, provided the most reliable coordinates. But inserting them into NVA-controlled territory meant helicopter insertions under fire and extraction windows measured in minutes. Forward air controllers, flying low and slow, in O-1 Bird Dogs or O-2 Skymasters, became the essential link. They translated grid squares into bombing runs, marked targets with white phosphorus rockets, and radioed corrections in real time. For Arclight, facts didn't mark targets. They confirmed them hours before the bombers launched from Guam, knowing that by the time the cell arrived overhead, the enemy would still be there, dug in and confident. Binh Long Province in June 1966 was a patchwork of abandoned rubber plantations and secondary jungle, crisscrossed by trails that fed the Saigon corridor. The NVA 9th Division had moved 2 regiments into the area, preparing for a coordinated push against Route 13, the main supply artery linking Saigon to the Central Highlands. American intelligence, piecing together radio intercepts and agent reports, estimated 1,500 to 2,000 troops concentrated in a 3-square-mile zone near the village of Loc Ninh. A Marine reconnaissance team inserted by helicopter on June 20th confirmed fresh trench lines, stacked ammunition crates, and a command bunker complex identifiable by its radio antennas strung between trees. The coordinates went up the chain to MAZV headquarters in Saigon, then across the Pacific to the 3rd Air Division on Guam. Mission planners selected a 9-ship cell, 3 flights of 3 bombers each, and scheduled time on target for 10:48 a.m. on June 22nd. Weather forecasts predicted scattered clouds at 8,000 feet, no factor for radar bombing. Each B-52 would carry 42 M117s and 24 M118s, a mix chosen to collapse bunkers and fragment tree trunks into secondary projectiles. The lead navigator received offset aim points designed to walk the bomb line from north to south, ensuring that if the enemy tried to flee, they would run into the next wave. Refueling tracks over the South China Sea were pre-coordinated with KC-135 tankers. Total mission time from Anderson to target and back would exceed 13 hours. At Anderson, the lead radar navigator sat through the mission brief in a windowless room that smelled of coffee and mimeograph ink. The intelligence officer tapped a map with his pointer. Grid square, suspected strength, last confirmed activity. Standard stuff. The navigator had flown 23 Arclight missions and knew the routine. 6 hours out, 30 seconds over target, 6 hours back. He copied the coordinates onto his kneeboard card, double-checked the offset aim points, and filed out with the rest of the crew toward the flight line. The B-52 squatted on the tarmac under floodlights, its belly already loaded. Ordnance crews were finishing the external pylons, and the smell of JP-4 fuel mixed with the salt air blowing in from the Pacific. The pilot did his walk-around, the co-pilot ran the checklist, and the navigator climbed through the hatch into the belly compartment. He strapped into his ejection seat, flipped on the radar scope, and watched it warm up. Green phosphor glow, familiar and cold. 13 hours. He'd done it before. He'd do it again. On the ground, the NVA regiment followed its routine. Sentries rotated every 4 hours. Cooking fires were lit only at dawn and dusk, when smoke blended with mist. Ammunition bearers moved crates from the trail junction to forward positions, stacking them in bunkers roofed with 3 layers of logs and 2 feet of earth. The regimental commander, a veteran of Dien Bien Phu, had survived French artillery and American napalm. He trusted depth, camouflage, and dispersion. His units occupied a network of interconnected trenches, each zigzagging to limit blast effects, each covered with woven bamboo mats that broke up the geometric lines visible from the air. Morale was high. Replacements had arrived from the north, bringing new AK-47 seconds, and rumors of a general offensive planned for the dry season. No one heard the bombers. At 30,000 feet, engine noise dissipated into the thin air, and contrails, if they formed at all, were invisible beneath the cloud deck. The first bomb, a 3,000-pound M118, punched through the canopy at terminal velocity and detonated 6 feet underground, creating a crater 40 feet across and 20 feet deep. The shock wave radiated outward at 7,000 feet per second, faster than sound, collapsing lungs and rupturing eardrums before the roar arrived. Then the next bomb hit, and the next, each separated by a fraction of a second, each adding its energy to a rolling barrage that marched across the target box at the speed of falling steel. 30 seconds. That was the duration of the first bomber's drop. In that half-minute, 66 bombs impacted across a corridor 900 yards long and 400 yards wide. Trees 60 feet tall snapped at the base and toppled inward, their crowns smashing into adjacent trunks and creating a cascade of falling timber. Bunkers designed to withstand mortar fire imploded as overlapping shock waves compressed the air inside to lethal pressures. Trench walls, held together by root systems and sandbags, liquefied into loose dirt that buried anyone crouching at the bottom. The second bomber's load arrived 15 seconds later, extending the destruction southward. The third bomber completed the pattern, ensuring that the entire regimental position, from command post to supply cache to forward trenches, was subjected to at least one direct hit or near miss within a 100-yard radius. When the dust settled, the jungle had been rewritten. Craters overlapped into a moonscape of raw earth and shattered wood. The few survivors, those who had been at the extreme edges of the target box or inside the deepest bunkers, emerged into a landscape stripped of reference points. Radio antennas were gone. The command bunker had collapsed into its own crater. Ammunition caches detonated in secondary explosions that continued for hours, sending columns of black smoke high enough to be visible from Saigon. A Marine rifle company inserted by helicopter the following morning found no organized resistance, only scattered groups of shell-shocked soldiers wandering without weapons or unit cohesion. The regiment, as a fighting force, had ceased to exist. A Marine corporal stepped off the Huey into silence. No gunfire, no movement, just the smell of torn earth and cordite hanging in the humid air. The tree line ahead looked like it had been fed through a wood chipper, stumps, splinters, and craters filled with muddy water. His squad spread out, rifles up, but there was nothing to shoot at. They found a trench half buried under a collapsed tree. Inside, a single NVA soldier sat with his back against the dirt wall, staring at nothing. No weapon, no helmet, no reaction when the Marines approached. The corporal waved a hand in front of the man's face. Nothing. He'd seen that look before, after heavy shelling, but never like this. Like someone had reached inside and switched off the lights. The squad moved deeper into the target zone. More craters, more shattered bunkers, more silence. They found equipment scattered everywhere. Rifles bent in half, radios crushed into unrecognizable metal. A cooking pot with rice still in it, cold and covered in dust. No bodies. The bombs had buried most of them, but enough evidence to know that a lot of people had been here yesterday. The corporal keyed his radio and reported back. No contact, no resistance, target destroyed. He didn't mention the silence. or the way it felt wrong, like walking through a graveyard that was still smoking. Arc Light's effectiveness was not immediately obvious to American ground commanders, who were accustomed to calling in tactical air support and watching the results unfold in real time. B-52 strikes happened over the horizon, and their effects were measured in the absence of contact rather than the presence of explosions. But by mid-1966, patterns emerged. NVA units that had been tracked by intelligence and then subjected to arc light either disappeared from the operational map or reappeared weeks later at half strength, their command structure shattered and their logistical tail severed. Captured documents revealed that Hanoi had issued new directives: avoid concentrations larger than company size, dig deeper, move more often, and never remain in one location longer than 72 hours. The North Vietnamese were learning the same lesson that German and Japanese forces had learned in World War II. When an enemy possesses both the industrial capacity to deliver thousands of tons of ordnance and the navigational precision to place it within a few hundred yards of a target, traditional defensive tactics become liabilities. Trenches, bunkers, massed formations, all vulnerable. The difference was altitude. Tactical bombers flying at 5,000 feet could be heard, seen, and sometimes shot down. B-52 seconds at 30,000 feet were a silent, invisible force that turned jungle sanctuaries into killing grounds without warning. By 1967, the North Vietnamese had adapted. Intelligence officers in Hanoi studied arc light patterns and identified predictable elements. Strikes concentrated near known trails, targeted areas where ground forces had reported contact, and followed a cycle tied to reconnaissance flights and FAC activity. The solution was dispersion and deception. Regiments broke into battalion-sized elements, each occupying a separate grid square. Dummy positions, complete with false radio traffic and visible trench lines, were constructed in areas likely to draw attention. Real command posts moved underground into cave complexes along the Laotian border, where limestone karst formations provided natural protection against even 3,000-pound bombs. The Ho Chi Minh Trail became the laboratory for these tactics. American intelligence knew the trail existed, a network of roads, paths, and river crossings, stretching from North Vietnam through Laos and Cambodia into South Vietnam. But locating specific segments and predicting traffic flow required constant surveillance. Arc light missions along the trail faced a different challenge than strikes against fixed positions. The enemy was moving. A truck park identified by a reconnaissance drone on Monday might be empty by Wednesday when the bombers arrived. The solution was saturation. Instead of targeting a specific convoy, planners would carpet bomb entire trail segments, hoping to catch supply columns in transit or at least crater the road badly enough to force detours. Effectiveness varied. A 3-ship cell dropping on a suspected truck park near the Mujia Pass in October 1967 cratered 2 miles of road and destroyed an estimated 12 trucks. But post-strike reconnaissance showed fresh tire tracks bypassing the impact zone within 48 hours. The North Vietnamese had pre-positioned repair teams with gravel, logs, and pontoon bridges, and they worked at night under triple canopy cover that defeated infrared sensors. The trail was less a road than a living system, constantly rerouted and rebuilt, absorbing damage and regenerating faster than arclight could suppress it. But the psychological effect was undeniable. Truck drivers and trail porters learned to dread clear nights, when the absence of cloud cover meant better radar returns and more accurate bombing. Units moving south adopted a forced march schedule, covering as much ground as possible before dawn and then dispersing into the jungle for daylight hours. The constant threat of arclight, unpredictable, unstoppable, and silent until the first bomb hit, imposed a tax on morale and logistics that no amount of political indoctrination could fully offset. The technical challenge for arclight crews was endurance. 13 hours in a pressurized tube at 30,000 feet, the monotony broken only by refueling and the final minutes over target. Each B-52 rendezvoused with a KC-135 tanker over the South China Sea, taking on fuel through a flying boom while holding formation within a 10-foot envelope. Weather, turbulence, and radio discipline all factored into success rates. A missed refueling meant diversion to Thailand, and a disrupted mission schedule. Navigation relied on celestial fixes and inertial platforms, cross-checked obsessively across 2,600 miles. A single degree of heading error could place a bomber miles off course by the time it reached the target. The radar navigator's scope became the final arbiter. If the offset aim points didn't align with expected terrain features, the mission was aborted. Crews traded control every 2 hours, but no one fully relaxed. The gunners stared into empty sky for hours, knowing that if a MiG appeared, he'd have seconds to react. The radar navigator hunched over his scope in the belly, neck aching, eyes burning from the green glow. It was a test of endurance as much as skill. The electronic warfare officer monitored for radar emissions that might indicate SAM sites or interceptor activity. North Vietnam's SA-2 guideline missiles could reach up to 60,000 feet, well above arc-light altitudes. But SAM sites concentrated around Hanoi and Haiphong. Arc-light missions over South Vietnam and Laos faced minimal SAM threats, though crews never assumed safety. The EW officers' panel lit up with strobes and tones whenever a radar painted the aircraft. Standard procedure: note the bearing, estimate the range, prepare for evasive action if a launch was detected. MiG interceptors posed a different problem. The North Vietnamese Air Force operated MiG-17 seconds and MiG-21 seconds from bases near Hanoi, and while neither could reach 30,000 feet with a useful combat load, they could climb to intercept bombers during descent or refueling. American F-4 Phantoms flying combat air patrol provided a defensive screen, but coordination was imperfect. On one occasion in April 1967, a MiG-21 slipped through the cap and closed to within 5 miles of a B-52 cell before being driven off by a Phantom vectored in by an EC-121 radar picket. The incident prompted changes to escort procedures and reinforced the importance of maintaining altitude until the last possible moment. Weather was the variable no one could control. Monsoon clouds over the target didn't affect radar bombing, but they complicated reconnaissance and made it harder to confirm results. Typhoons in the South China Sea forced tankers to reposition, sometimes delaying refueling by hours. Thunderstorms over Guam, grounded bombers, or forced diversions, and the tropical heat on the flight line made ordnance loading slow and dangerous. Crews adapted by treating every mission as routine. The pilot and co-pilot traded jokes over intercom to stay awake. The navigator rechecked his math for the 3rd time. The radar navigator stared at his scope, watching the green returns crawl closer, waiting for the moment when the computer would release the bombs and the airframe would lurch upward, suddenly 8 tons lighter. Then the long flight home, the tanker rendezvous again, the descent into Guam with the sun rising over the Pacific, debrief, sleep, and the next mission brief already posted on the squadron board. The siege of Khe Sanh in early 1968 became ArcLight's defining test. 2 NVA divisions, an estimated 20,000 troops, encircled the Marine combat base, dug into the hills, and prepared for a final assault that American commanders feared would become another Dien Bien Phu. The base sat in a valley 6 miles from the Laotian border, surrounded by ridgelines that offered the NVA perfect observation and artillery positions. Resupply depended on C-130 transports landing under fire or parachute drops that often missed the perimeter. The Marines, outnumbered and isolated, called for every available fire support asset, and ArcLight became the siege's signature weapon. Between January 21st and March 31st, B-52 seconds flew over 2,400 sorties around Khe Sanh, dropping more than 75,000 tons of ordnance. Strikes were coordinated with ground sensors, acoustic and seismic detectors planted along likely approach routes that picked up troop movements and vehicle traffic. When sensors indicated activity, Coordinates were radioed to a forward air controller orbiting overhead in an O2, who confirmed the target and passed it to the arc light cell already inbound. Time on target windows shrank to 30 minutes. Some strikes were planned, executed, and assessed within 2 hours of initial detection. The effect was cumulative. NVA trenches that crept to within 500 yards of the marine wire were obliterated overnight. Artillery positions that had shelled the base for days went silent after a single arc light pass. Captured prisoners reported entire companies wiped out by bombing, with survivors so disoriented that they wandered into marine ambushes or surrendered without resistance. The psychological impact was profound. NVA soldiers learned that any concentration, platoon, company, or battalion invited annihilation from an enemy they could neither see nor hear until the bombs arrived. Captain Billings flew his O2 Skymaster in lazy circles at 4,000 feet, low enough to see the ridgelines, high enough to stay out of small arms range. His job was simple: confirm sensor hits, pass coordinates, stay alive. The radio crackled. Ground sensors had picked up movement in a draw northwest of the base, estimated battalion strength. He banked toward the coordinates, eyes scanning the jungle below. Nothing visible, but that was normal. The NVA were good at hiding. He marked the spot mentally, checked his map, and keyed the radio. Coordinates confirmed. Arclight cell inbound. ETA, 20 minutes. He climbed to 6,000 feet and waited, circling, watching. The jungle below looked peaceful, almost serene. Then the horizon rippled. No sound at first, just the visual. A line of eruptions marching through the draw, dirt and trees fountaining upward in sequence. The roar arrived seconds later, a rolling thunder that rattled his airframe even at altitude. He counted 1, 2, 3 waves, 9 bombers. The draw disappeared under smoke and dust. He descended for battle damage assessment, circling the impact zone. The jungle had been peeled back like skin off an orange. Craters overlapped, trees shredded, and through the smoke he could see scattered figures running, stumbling, directionless. He radioed back. Target destroyed. Secondary explosions observed. Enemy dispersed. Then he turned toward the base, already scanning for the next sensor alert. It was going to be a long night. One strike on February 5, 1968, illustrated the system's precision. Sensors detected a large formation moving through a draw northwest of the base, estimated at battalion strength. The FAC confirmed fresh tracks and disturbed vegetation. A 3-ship cell diverted from a scheduled target and dropped within 20 minutes of the initial report. Post-strike reconnaissance by a Marine patrol found over 100 bodies, destroyed crew-served weapons, and a command post reduced to splinters. The battalion had been advancing in column, confident that darkness and terrain would shield them. The arc-light strike caught them in the open, and the survivors scattered into the hills, abandoning their mission. Khe Sanh held. When the siege lifted in April, Marine patrols sweeping the surrounding hills found evidence of the bombardment's toll: mass graves, abandoned equipment, and trench systems that had been systematically dismantled by overlapping bomb patterns. NVA after-action reports, captured later, described Arclight as the single most demoralizing factor in the campaign, more feared than artillery, napalm, or helicopter gunships. Massed formations, even in rugged terrain, could not survive against precision tonnage delivered from altitudes beyond retaliation. But Arclight had limits. The system required accurate intelligence, and in the dense jungle of the A Shao Valley or the Mekong Delta, finding targets was harder than hitting them. False positives, strikes on empty jungle, or friendly positions misidentified as enemy, wasted sorties and eroded confidence. On one occasion in May 1968, a B-52 cell dropped on coordinates provided by an ARVN unit, only to discover that the target was a Montagnard village allied with the Americans. The incident prompted stricter verification procedures and highlighted the danger of relying on second-hand intelligence. Cost was another factor. Each Arclight sortie consumed fuel, ordnance, and crew hours at rates that strained even America's industrial base. A single mission from Guam cost approximately $30,000 in 1966 dollars, not counting aircraft depreciation or tanker support. Bombs had to be shipped from the continental United States to Guam, a logistics pipeline that stretched across the Pacific and competed with other supply priorities. By 1968, the Air Force was flying over 1,800 Arc-Light sorties per month, dropping nearly 50,000 tons of bombs, a tempo that required constant replenishment and maintenance. The North Vietnamese response evolved into a doctrine of survival through dispersion. Units adopted a cellular structure, with squads and platoons operating independently and reassembling only for specific missions. Command posts became mobile, relocating every 48 hours and using runners instead of radios to avoid signals intercepts. Supply caches were distributed in small, camouflaged bunkers rather than centralized depots. The goal was to present no target large enough to justify an arc-light strike, forcing the Americans to waste resources on empty jungle or accept that small unit infiltration would continue unchecked. This adaptation imposed its own costs. Dispersed units were harder to coordinate, and the absence of centralized command slowed decision-making. Small caches meant more resupply runs, increasing the risk of interdiction. The constant movement exhausted troops and degraded morale, but it worked. By late 1968, the proportion of arc-light strikes that produced confirmed enemy casualties had dropped, and American commanders began to question cost-effectiveness. Arc-light remained devastating against fixed positions or massed formations, but it could not, by itself, stop a determined enemy willing to trade cohesion for survival. Linebacker II in December 1972 brought Arc-Light back to North Vietnam itself. For 11 days, B-52 seconds struck targets around Hanoi and Haiphong, rail yards, power plants, petroleum storage, and SAM sites, a campaign designed to force concessions at the Paris peace talks. This was a different war than the jungle strikes of 1966. The North Vietnamese had built the world's densest air defense network, with over 200 SAM sites and thousands of anti-aircraft guns protecting the capital. B-52 seconds, designed for high-altitude nuclear strikes against undefended Soviet targets, now faced an integrated defense system that could track, target, and engage multiple aircraft simultaneously. The first night, December 18th, saw the largest B-52 raid of the war, over 100 bombers in waves. Supported by F-4 Wild Weasels, tasked with suppressing SAMs and phone, 111-second striking airfields to keep MiGs grounded. The North Vietnamese fired over 200 SAMs in the first hour, and 3 B-52 seconds went down, 2 to direct hits, 1 to proximity fuses that shredded control surfaces and forced the crew to bail out over Laos. The losses shocked Strategic Air Command, which had assumed that altitude, jamming, and chaff would provide adequate protection. Crews adapted, tactics shifted from straight-line bombing runs to more aggressive maneuvers, post-target turns to evade SAMs, lower altitudes to reduce radar tracking time, and tighter cell formations to concentrate jamming power. Electronic warfare officers became the most critical crew members, their panels glowing with threat indicators as they cycled through jamming modes and dispensed chaff bundles to create false radar returns. The North Vietnamese adapted in turn, firing SAMs in salvos to overwhelm jamming and using optical tracking when radar was degraded. The result was a high-stakes chess match played at 500 knots and 30,000 feet, where a single mistake, a missed turn, a jammed chaff dispenser, a radar lock held too long, meant death. By the campaign's end on December 29th, 15 B-52 seconds had been lost, and 92 crewmen were dead, missing, or captured. But the North Vietnamese air defense system had been gutted. SAM sites ran out of missiles faster than resupply could arrive from the Soviet Union. Rail yards were cratered so thoroughly that reconstruction would take months. Petroleum storage facilities burned for days, and the power grid serving Hanoi went dark. The political effect was immediate. North Vietnam returned to the negotiating table, and the Paris Peace Accords were signed 6 weeks later. ArcLight's legacy was doctrinal. The United States Air Force concluded that strategic bombers could deliver tactical effects if supported by adequate intelligence, electronic warfare, and fighter escort. The concept of pattern bombing against area targets gave way to precision-guided munitions in later conflicts. But the underlying principle, mass and altitude, combined with accurate targeting, remained foundational. The B-52, designed in the 1940s, proved adaptable enough to remain in service into the 21st century. Its bomb bays refitted for GPS-guided weapons, and its avionics upgraded for digital networking. For the North Vietnamese, ArcLight validated the doctrine of dispersion and mobility. Post-war analyses credited the tactic with inflicting significant casualties. Estimates ranged from tens of thousands to over 100,000. NVA and Viet Cong killed, but acknowledged that adaptation had offset some of its effectiveness. Industrial firepower could destroy formations and infrastructure, but survival required constant evolution, and the enemy proved willing to pay that price. American ground commanders who had called in ArcLight strikes during the war's middle years remembered the tactic with a mix of awe and frustration. The strikes were devastating when they hit, but the process, requesting coordinates, waiting for approval, coordinating with Air Force planners on Guam, and then hoping the target hadn't moved, felt disconnected from the fluid reality of jungle warfare. Close air support from 4 seconds or helicopter gunships offered immediacy and flexibility. ArcLight offered certainty and obliteration, but only if the intelligence was perfect and the enemy cooperated by staying in place. The crews who flew the missions carried their own memories. 13-hour flights in a pressurized tube, the monotony broken only by refueling, and the final minutes over target, the green glow of radar scopes, the thump transmitted through the airframe as bombs released, the silent prayer that no SAM warning tone would sound, that no MiG would appear in the tail gunner's sight, that the tanker would be where it was supposed to be on the way home. And the knowledge, never quite articulated but always present, that the bombs falling from their aircraft were erasing human beings who would never hear the engines, never see the contrails, never have a chance to run. The jungle grew back, craters filled with rainwater and became ponds. Trees sprouted in the churned earth, and within a decade, the scars of ArcLight had faded into the landscape. But the memory persisted, encoded in doctrine and in the stories told by veterans on both sides. For the Americans, ArcLight represented the apex of industrial warfare, the ability to project lethal force across thousands of miles with precision and overwhelming scale. For the Vietnamese, it was a reminder that survival required constant adaptation, that no position was safe, and that the price of concentration was annihilation. The final accounting was numerical and cold. Over the course of the war, B-52 seconds flew more than 126,000 ArcLight sorties, dropping over 3 million tons of ordnance. The NVA regiment that vanished in 30 seconds over Binh Long Province in June 1966 was the first of many. Each strike refined the system, and each adaptation by the enemy tested its limits. Altitude and tonnage could erase formations and shatter morale, but the jungle, and the will beneath it, proved harder to break than anyone expected. Stories like this remind us that war isn't just about dates and numbers. It's about people, the split-second decisions that shaped entire battles. Every flight, every firefight, every tactic is a piece of a massive puzzle, where one order could decide the fate of hundreds. We bring back these forgotten moments to show that behind every report and archive page stood real men, pilots, scouts, engineers, soldiers, whose courage and ingenuity changed the course of war, even if their names were never written in textbooks. Tell us in the comments, what moment of the Vietnam War impressed you the most? Or what operation should we cover next? Your ideas keep these stories alive. If you enjoyed this video, Leave a like and subscribe. It helps us uncover more forgotten chapters where history lives through those who fought it.